The most tyrannical Decius, having reigned a very short time, between 2 or 3 years, was slain of the barbarians. After Decius, his death, God sent a pestilence on the empire of 10 years' continuance. In it the Christians visited each other, though infection did kill the visitors next in short space. But the Gentiles, being cruelly uncharitable, neglected their brethren, being sick, and cast out their dead bodies to the dogs. Upon this pestilence Cyprian wrote his book, De Mortalitate. Gallus and Volasianus succeeded by treason next to Decius, and reigned but a short time for their persecuting. Gallus setting forth decrees for persecution, banishing many bishops and pastors from their flocks, condemning others to the metal mines. To this time I refer the banishment of Cyprian, he being then bishop of Carthage, who in his absence from his flock by this exilement made supply by his many excellent letters, which are yet in a great part extant. Anno Christi 256 AD, Roman Bishop Lucius. This Lucius was also banished under these two co-emperors. This Lucius is said to ordain that 2 priests with 3 deacons should always be with a bishop to witness his conversation, which order may be very good and useful, but it seems not to agree with Lucius his time, wherein there was not such greatness of bishops to retain and maintain such retinue, nor such freedom from persecution as that they durst be seen openly abroad. Other ordinances put upon him are suspected of feigning. Roman Emperor Valerianus and his son Gallienus. Roman Bishop Stephanus, near 259 AD. The bishop is said by many authors to die a martyr. Many decrees fathered upon him, but they are feigned. These 2 Roman emperors, reigning covertly together, were very courteous to the Christians, by reason whereof, and the greatness of the pestilence in the empire, persecution was extinguished for some 2 or 3 years, insomuch that the emperor's court was full of Christians. But after Valerian, having an Egyptian, a chief ruler of the heathen synagogue, and chief of the enchanters, being hindered by the Christians' prayers from his feats and charms, complaining and incensing thereupon the emperor, the said Valerian was moved by him to move the 8th persecution. Cyprian adds in his 4th book and 4th epistle certain causes on the Christians' part of this persecution, the sins and dissensions of the Christians. Finally, that wicked accusers caused this persecution by accusing the Christians of being the causes of the evils of famine, pestilence, and so on the empire. Against all these Cyprian writes an eloquent apology intituled Contra Demetrianum, as Tertullian had done before Contra Scapulum. In the time of this persecution was Cyprian martyred, whose name was Aelius Statius, whose country was Carthage in Africa, who was made first a priest, then the bishop of Carthage. He was very careful of the afflicted brethren, a great reader of Tertullian, and a man that had many godly visions as of future persecutions, and so on. At last, refusing to offer to idols, this persecution took off his head, and crowned him with martyrdom. For the excellent sentences penned by him, his books tell the world of them sufficiently. He had his blemishes, as other fathers were not free, though the papist's fault is to make too much of everything. Origen had something that the Church now holds not. Polycarp observed Easter after the Jews' custom. Ignatius makes fasting on the Sabbath as bad as killing Christ. Irenaeus held that man was not made perfect in the beginning and seems to defend free will. Tertullian is noted for a Chiliast and a Montanian. Justin seems to incline to Chiliasm, to the opinion of angels falling by concupiscence of women, and to the doctrine of free will. And this Cyprian held contrary to the Church, rebaptizing of infants baptized by heretics, whereupon fell great contention between him and Stephanus, Bishop of Rome. Besides this Cyprian, there was a second, who was an idolater and a practicer of magic, was converted to a Christian, made a priest and bishop of Antioch, of which he was a native citizen, and afterwards martyred under Diocletian. Lastly, a third Cyprian, long after both these, there was in the time of the Emperor Julius, Apostata. Roman bishops, Sixtus II, alias Sixtus II. The Bishop of Rome is in this persecution martyred with 6 Christians for being Christians. Lawrence in this persecution was martyred, between whom and Sixtus the bishop was love and words, as between the dearest father and son, especially when he saw Sixtus going to martyrdom. This Lawrence was a virtuous Levite, a minister of the sacraments, and a distributor of the church's riches, whereupon the covetous emperor, demanding where he had bestowed the same, after 3 days' respite gotten of the emperor, for answer, he brings the poor, saying, "These are the precious treasury of the church." The emperor, conceiving himself mocked in his answer, commands Lawrence to be tormented to death by pinching him with fiery tongues, girding him with burning plates, laying him on the iron grate or gridiron red hot, roasting, broiling, and tossing and turning him, in the suffering of all which, this is all that Lawrence said: "This side is now roasted enough. Turn up, O tyrant great, and see whether roasted or raw thou thinkst the better meat." By this suffering of Lawrence, thus patiently suffered death in so great torments, a Roman soldier was converted, desiring to be baptized. Thereupon he was martyred. Dionysius, bishop of Alexandria, with certain brethren, was banished in this persecution to Sephro, for not worshipping the heathen gods, and proving that there was only one true God whom they ought to worship. In this persecution were martyred men, old and young, women, wives, and maids, and young simple innocents. Eusebius the deacon, notwithstanding his many persecutions, lived ministering to the living fettered confessors and burying the dead martyrs, and after was made bishop of Laodicea, and after died in peace about the year 268. In Caesarea Palestine suffered martyrdom Priscus, Malchus, and Alexander, who became martyrs by seeing the Christian courage of others martyred. In the city of Carthage at this time were martyred 300. In Simila of Italy, Pontius was martyred by being first hanged on the rack, then cast to the wild beasts. Then these, not hurting him, was cast too into the fire, of which, as Vincentius saith, being not hurt, he was last of all beheaded, and cast into the flood. His tormentors were so vexed after with spirits, that they bit off their tongues and died. Bergonensis is here to be reproved for writing in his 8th book, in the story of this Emperor Valerianus, that Philippus was Bishop of Alexandria, and beheaded under the same Valerian, which is clean contrary to approved authors and the course of time. At this time was one Philippus made president of Alexandria, who had a daughter named Eugenia, of rare beauty, who, to avoid marriage with a pagan and heathen persecutor, fled from her father, going in man's apparel, calling herself Eugenius, and for her parts was made head of a society of Christians, where a lustful matron, being enamored with her beauty, supposing her to be a man, labored to draw her in uncleanness with her. But Eugenia not consenting, this matron accuseth Eugenia to have labored to deflower her, whereupon the matter was brought forth before Philippus, the president, who, according to allegations, being about to condemn her to death, Eugenia, seeing no other evidence would serve, discovered herself to Philippus to be an innocent, a woman, and his daughter, and so was restored and received of Philippus as an innocent and a daughter, who not long after converted her father to Christianity, who after died also a martyr. And after his death, Eugenia, returning to Rome, was also martyred. Anno Christi 262. In the 6th year of Valerianus and Gallienus were Victor and Victorinus, having been imprisoned 3 years, martyred. In the 6th year of Valerianus and Gallienus were Victor and Victorinus, having been imprisoned 3 years, martyred. 262. Fructosus, bishop of Tarragona in Spain, with his 2 deacons, Argurius and Eulogius, were martyred, at this time in the fire, for calling idols dumb gods of stocks, and professing his worship and opinion of the true God. It is reported by some that a soldier saw the heavens open over them, as they were in the fire receiving them, a soldier and the persecuting president's daughter beholding the same. The Emperor Valerian, having thus persecuted the church, 2 of the 7 years that he had reigned, he was taken in war by the king of Persia, and made his block to take horse to his dying day. Claudius, his persecuting president, was so vexed with the devil that he bit off his tongue and died. Gallienus, and the son of Valerian, for his part in persecuting, had many earthquakes, and 30 rebellions moved in his empire, whereupon he mitigated persecution, yet some were somewhat troubled. His father reigned 7 years together with him, and he reigned 9 alone, somewhat more quietly. Roman Bishop Dionysius. 266. The ordinances put on Dionysius are feigned. Some say he was bishop 9 years, others 6 years and 2 months. Roman Emperor Claudius. This Claudius was also a quiet emperor. He reigned about 2 years. 272. Roman Emperor Quintilianus Aurelianus. This emperor was also quiet. He continued but 17 days. This Aurelianus begins mildly, but anon after moves the 9th persecution. In his mild time was a council of Christians at Antioch, he seeming not to be against it or them. In the beginning of his tyranny, he makes his entrance into blood with the death of his sister's son. As he was about to seal an edict for persecution, he was so terrified with thunder and lightning that it stopped his tyranny. About the 5th or 6th year of his reign, he was slain. 278. Pub and Tacitus Florianus. This emperor Tacitus reigned about 6 months. This Florian reigned but 60 days. 280. mar.au.probus. And Roman bishop, that's 280 AD, and 281 Anno Christi, Felix Eutychianus, 280, 281 to 284. In the first year of this probus was Felix bishop, who died a martyr. Eutychianus bishop. This emperor Probus was a quiet prince and an enemy to idle soldiers, keeping his soldiers to diligent labor, whereupon his soldiers slew him, having reigned about 6 years. Carus with his 2 sons, Carinus and Numerianus. This Carus, warring against the Persians, was slain with lightning. Numerianus, immoderately lamenting for his father, by much weeping made his eyes sore, whereby he being constrained to keep within doors, was slain of Aper his father-in-law, which Aper would answer when any asked for Numerian, that he kept private because of his sore eyes. Thus was he justly slain by Aper, who had slain godly Cyrillus, for refusing to admit him an idolater into the Christian temple. Aper usurps the empire near 282. That would be this. Caius, who was martyred in the 10th persecution. That's a Roman bishop. Let's see, I think I read this already. Numerianus, immoderately lamenting his father, by much weeping made his eyes sore, whereby he being constrained to keep within doors, was slain of Aper his father-in-law, which Aper would answer when they asked for Numerian, that he kept private because of his sore eyes. Thus was he justly slain by Aper, who had slain godly Cyrillus, for refusing to admit him an idolater into the Christian's temple. Alright, Caius, who was martyred in the 10th persecution, 282 AD. These two, Car and Num, being slain in the east parts, Carinus, the other son, reigned alone in Italy, with much wickedness. At last the armies set up Diocletian to be emperor, and the tribune slays Carinus, whose wife Carinus had defiled. Thus these three, Carnum and Carn, reigned not above 3 years. 289. Thus the church had much peace all this while, till the 19th year of Diocletian. For the church being in peace with the heathens, dissents within herself, and lying still gathers corruption. Anon, therefore, to quiet and purge her in herself, God's just wisdom sends them more persecution the 10th time. 290 AD, Roman Emperor Diocletian, he chooses Maximinus, fellow emperor with him. Kings of England, Carausius alias Serosius, and Alectus, 290 AD. The Diocletian being nominated, as we said, to be emperor, and being told by Debus, his concubine, he must slay a boar before he could be emperor. He runs with his sword upon Aper, for that, as he said, he had unjustly slain Numerian, and so slays him and comes fully to the crown. As Diocletian, for the troublousness of the empire, had joined to him Maximium, so these two chose to them Galerius, 296. Roman bishop Marcellinus, who was sided up, made to appear and condemned by the council of Sinuus, martyr, Marcellus, martyr, Eusebius, martyr, Miltiades, martyr, 296 to 304. Asclepio Datus, Coillus, kings of England. Galerius and Constantius, Caesars under them. About the 19th year of this Diocletian doth he begin the 10th persecution, which lasted 10 years together, exceeding the rest in length and sharpness. His first act in this tragedy, after the above said peaceable preface, was to pull down Christian churches to the ground, to burn the scriptures, and displace all magistrates that would not abjure Christianity. The second act was to essay by all possible torments to make bishops and elders to sacrifice to idols. In the third act he comes to the common Christians, but first begins in his camp, where many of his soldiers valiantly and voluntarily died to be soldiers of Christ, under the colors of martyrdom. An infinite number of others were martyred, nay, the very places and torments where and wherewith they were martyred arise to a mighty multitude. At Nicomedia, a Christian, a nobleman born, seeing the edict of the emperor set up for persecution, takes it down and tears it, the two emperors being in the city, for which he was miserably tormented. Diocletian tyrannizeth in the east, and Maximus in the west. Serena, the wife of Diocletian the emperor, is martyred for Christianity. 20,000 martyrs burned together in one church. Martyrs in Phrygia are burnt with the whole city. Diverse in this persecution were martyred in France, in Spain, Britain, so that in these countries some rivers were colored with the blood of Christians. Eusebius, an eyewitness of torment, martyrdom executed on Diverse in Thebaid, and of tormentors wearied with exercising cruelty on the invincible patience of Christians, singing psalms in torment to the last gasp. In Book of Martyrs, page 103 and 104. Marcellinus revolts, anon he repents, and dies a martyr. 100 martyrs slain at once in one day, of men, women, and children. 17,000 martyrs in 1 month slain. 300 martyrs at one time in Alexandria. Of Lauritius, the captain, with 6,666 of his soldiers martyred. Victor with 360 martyred. Christians increase in persecution. 305 Anno Christi, Diocletian and Maximian, tired with persecuting, give up their empire and lead a private life, having reigned about 21 years or near upon. Maximinus and Constantius, kings of England. This Constantius extends his empire over England by 309 AD. These two, Maximinus and Constantius, before Caesars, now become emperors. Maximinus in the east and Constantius in the west. Maximinus chooseth his sons Maximinus and Severus Caesars under him. Constantius chooseth Constantinus his son Caesar under him. 309 AD. Maxentius set up by the soldiers. Against this Maxentius thus set up by the soldiers, Maximinus sent his son Severus, which Severus being slain, he chose Licinus, Caesar, in his room. These thus set up some to be emperors, viz. Maximinus, Constantius, Maxentius, and the rest as Caesars, continued to decennial persecution after Diocletian and his partner had given over, saving that Constantius, and especially his son Constantinus, were kind to the Christians. 311 AD. Sylvester I. Constantius, seeming to be willing to most advance those that are certain appointed solemnity, would most readily offer sacrifice, and thereby, according to his desire, discovering who were heathenish, idolaters, and who Christians, he commending the Christian refusers and deriders of that idolatry, chose them for his court, banished the others from him as unfit for his service, that were traitors to God.